Welcome to the Corporate Venturing Insider Series, where I interview top practitioners in the CVC world and learn with you the best practices and golden nuggets that they have accumulated over their career. In this episode, we will be learning from Victoria Slivkoff, Global Head of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at University of California. Victoria, could you take a few minutes to share your story and how you got to where you are today?
Great, thanks for having me. So I've been with the UC Office of the President for the past 3 years. As a system headquarters, the Office of the President provides centralized governance for the system by managing the $40 billion operating budget and over $120 billion in investments, and coordinating activities that allow this vast ecosystem to operate efficiently as one university. And my role is to manage the system-wide innovation and entrepreneurship enterprise. And this office was established 4 years ago to bring greater synergies across the system, comprised of 10 campuses, 5 medical centers, 3 national laboratories, 4 institutes for science and innovation, and a California statewide agriculture and natural resources division. Came to UC with a broad background in operations, strategy, and financial management. At my last role, working for a family office in this clean tech venture arm. Prior to that, I joined a solar company leading corporate development and investor relations, and that was quite a ride. And also, I had a stint as a startup co-founder. So if you step back and look at my career journey, I didn't follow a linear path, but I had the ability to wear many hats and deliver on a strategic, operational, and relationship level really prepared me for this role at UC. There are 6 key areas of functions that we serve to enable that transformation. Increase system-wide coordination, secure funding, create easier pathways to work with you all, map where our innovation and startup activities lie, and support faculty, student, alumni, entrepreneurs, and lastly, promoting UC's impact. Our labs serve as the R&D arms of the industry, and our incubators and accelerators serve as deal flow to VCs and CVCs. And then in turn, us at universities benefit from the industry's resources and know-how for technology translation and workforce development. We generated 14x ROI on the state's initial investment of $22 million. A third of that money went into POC funds, and it helps to create these new startups and launch new products. And again, I've heard loud and clear from my colleagues that they want more of that POC funding. So the thinking behind this new POC fund is threefold: de-risk technology so that the companies or technologies are more investor ready, work with industry to actively create companies based on our IP, and then support research translation. Our ideal partners are looking for an early look into the deal flow from UC or looking to drive impact through breakthroughs in innovations. And our thoughts around sustainability investment in this area will be supplemented through matching PIs with smart capital and entrepreneurs and operators, tapping to a network of EIRs. So as that wraps up my overview, I'd love to connect with VCs or CVCs who would like to work with UC.
Thank you, Victoria. It's a treat to have you today because you are clearly an amazing example of a well-run innovation powerhouse. I want to ask a very open question. What is an initiative you're most proud about in the last 4 years? And then maybe you can talk about what has been the most challenging aspect in the last 4 years.
What I'm really most proud about is about 15 months ago when we had a leadership transition in the unit, I was asked by UC leadership to look at how we can develop a new strategic roadmap for this unit because we're sort of a startup, right? I had to quickly put together that plan, deploy it, start launching monthly calls to convene this innovation and entrepreneurship going forward, to convene this community so that we can share best practices and opportunities. I would say the challenging side is to navigate through these relationships and different layers of governance and then trying to come up with a plan and a model that everybody can align to.
And given your diverse background and all the experience you had, do you have any tip about how to make it smoother?
As I talk about this transformation process from point A, right, to point B, we really have to look at the efficiencies. I think how to make that smoother in the context of corporate relationship is coming together with a mutual understanding what the expectations are. So that's one. 2 is structurally have the infrastructure in place So these relationships can be built. I talked about the 4 institutes for science and technology, and they were stood up as multi-campus entities specifically working with government and industries to solve these grand challenges. So 2 is infrastructure. 3 is removing barriers. I'll just give some examples of trying to standardize some aspects of the licensing agreement, standardize some of the workflows so that we can make this process as efficient as possible for both sides. And also, we need capital in all stages of development, from early stage grant to venture investment on the other side, and then folks that are willing to help and work with our entrepreneurs to help them be successful.
Very nice. And you talked about multiplier effect. Is that one of your funding criteria? And if so, how do you assess, measure this multiplier effect?
Yeah, so I'll give an example from the state investment that was made to UC 4 years ago, $22 million through Assembly Bill 2664. How we measure multiplier effect is matching funds raised, whether it's grant funding or investment funding, the number of startups created, which is about over 500, the number of products launched, and that was over 160 products launched with support for that money, and also the follow-on funding attracted by the startups. So collectively, that represented a 14x ROI. So really thinking about being really thoughtful about utilizing that initial investment and try to amplify that.
Actually, 14x ROI is amazing. That was a pitch you didn't mention before, but that's a real pitch. This is after the fact. When you're looking at all these opportunities to fund, you need to make decisions. How do you have this assessment of which one will have the biggest multiplier effect?
Yeah, so that's really a campus level decision down to a program level, because my colleagues on the ground are the closest to the startups, to the actions. So different levels of involvement where I can add value, and then the deployment is really dependent on the colleagues running the incubator, accelerator, and campus projects to make those decisions.
So POC Fund sounds fantastic. As
Right.
part of Citrus Foundry, how would you recommend we attempt to access this?
Yeah, so Citrus is one of the 4 institutes for science and innovation at UC. So I'm focusing on fundraising right now, and then we will be having those conversations with campus I&E leaders, innovation entrepreneurship program leaders, to decide if this is something that wants to be administered centrally, or is it something we want to do with the last round of state funding, just appropriating that money to the campuses equally, and then they can make those campus level decisions about how to deploy those funds.
Okay, very nice. What would you say your program's niche are? Basically, what makes your office different?
I think my office is different because we sit at the headquarters of the UC system. So I think what really makes us unique is that we have every technology vertical you can think of in every stages of development. So a lot of times people think that university innovations are mostly early, and that's not untrue, but we also have lots of technologies and startups that are mature, they're in a later stage. So I think that's what makes us really unique, is that diversity.
What it is that universities really care about, that corporate VCs need to understand before they even engage with them?
I think it's aligning objectives. I think from universities understanding what are the expectations from the corporate side in terms of engaging with UC or with universities in general. And from the university side, maybe stepping back and maybe helping to sketch out what is the holistic view of that relationship.
Very nice. I have another question, which is about, are you looking for international projects also? Is it possible for a non-US startup to apply?
So I'll start with the first one. So if you are a UC affiliate startup, meaning that a startup founded by UC students, faculty, staff, or alum, we will help you, and you have access to our resources through that affiliation. So non-US startups, actually several of our incubators, accelerators are starting to open up and accept startups from non-UC affiliations. For instance, Berkeley Skydeck is a good example. They accept even international startups applications. So I think we're becoming more and more welcoming and opening to startups from the entire community.
So before the interview, Victoria, we talked about these opportunity zones, government initiatives, and I don't think many people know about them. Can you give a little introduction and the value they have?
So the high level is that the government has designated certain zones that spur economic development. So they designate them as opportunity zones and have specific policies to provide incentives to attract companies to establish headquarters there. So really thinking about as a way from a policy perspective to democratize opportunities and shift some of the economic prosperities that we see in big cities, spread them more evenly throughout California.
Okay, thank you. You have quite some granularity around diversity. Do you mind giving a deep dive into how you look at that and how do you measure it? How do you track it? How do you encourage it?
Yes, so my colleagues at UCOP whole unit that tracks these engagement metrics and dashboards. So from my point of view, you have to recognize that diversity exists. The big and smaller campuses and different racial, demographic diversity, as well as diversity of people's background, domain expertise. We do track, are we funding women-led or minority-led companies? Are they properly represented in the companies that we admit to our cohorts? And what are some of the specific programs we have around supporting entrepreneurs? So going back to that AB 2664 money, some of that money went into creating legal services for entrepreneurs for the Central Valley, more connectivity and collaborations between the smaller and bigger campuses so that you can introduce that diversity and really opening up this innovation entrepreneurship ecosystem to not just folks from STEM backgrounds, but also people from non-STEM backgrounds. We'd love to work with folks from the humanity and arts background in order for this to be a truly diverse community.
Very nice. And because you do all this tracking, you can see what is improving. So a follow-up question is, what do you think you could do even better in that space?
Well, the work is never done. Funding is the most direct way to support our entrepreneurs. That's why I'm very focused on raising a proof of concept fund so that we can allocate more resources in a very tangible way to help entrepreneurs, specifically minority entrepreneurs.
I think that's a very important point because from what I see, it's really at the startup pipeline that you can really make a difference and encourage and support diversity. And it's not when you get to series A, B, or C that you really have an impact. How do you drive this mentorship? How do you guide it into the right directions? Can you walk us through how you think about mentorship?
Yeah, so map it to our 60 incubators and accelerators across the system. Each of them have developed this network of mentors. One of the things I'd love to introduce is, especially now we're working in a virtual environment, to enlarge regional connectivity to mentors to more of a broader connection. And then there are best practices of engagement, right? Are we tracking that engagement? Are we appropriately matching mentors to the right founders? Are we following up in terms of feedback from the mentor side as well as from the startup side? That are you all getting value out of that relationships?
Can you give us a view of what you think is different about corporate VCs versus every other partners you have?
We really value our relationship with corporate VCs. He has been participating in GCVI, Global Corporate Venturing and Innovation Summit, for the last few years, where we feature a pitch showcase from UC that essentially really shows you deal flow from the entire system. So we really think the CVC community is an important partner to our ecosystem because a lot of times that you have long-term strategic plans, you can be not just investors, but also customers, strategic partners, and potential acquirers of these startup companies. So we really enjoy the relationship building with CVCs and recognize the tremendous values that you bring to the table in terms of not just funding, but access to relationships, to networks, access to R&D or commercialization know-hows, and access to market channels.
Very nice. And I think I want to give credit to GCV because I think they really are helping to raise the bar in the CVC industry and making sure that best practices are understood and executed and bad practices are avoided. If you were to think about an ideal CVC working with you, what would they look like? Would they be big? Would they be small? Would they be very focused? Would they have a range of services? What would be the golden CVC for you to engage with?
I think that could be really diverse just because our asset base is very diverse, but I think the size is not what matters to me. Is that we're aligned on values. We have this mutual goal of working together to move groundbreaking research to the marketplace. I think aligning on value is one. I think someone who can plan with us, and so that we can understand what the long-term strategic vision is for the CVCs, and then we can try to map our resources and our startup activities, our deal flow to that. I think someone who's very opening to being customers or pilot partners to our startups, as we're really trying to just, bring our solutions to market. So I think those are sort of the key attributes that would make this relationship very fruitful for both sides.
Very nice. And I think it builds on what you said about ecosystem building, which is innovation thrives in dense networks, which means you need very different type of CVCs to engage. And the wide spectrum is actually enhancing that density and that quality of the network. What is CDC, Community Development Council?
I think broadly in terms of community engagement, that we're really thinking about driving public benefit as well as economic growth. So give an example of Aggie Square. That this is a partnership between UC Davis and the city of Sacramento and private sectors to intentionally spur innovations in this ecosystem to drive the economic development of Sacramento. So we're not going to have big cities that are really benefiting from this economic boon, and then really thinking about how to create social benefit and economic benefit for all. I think what this pandemic has highlighted is the vulnerability in our supply chain. The last few decades, supply chain has moved to different parts of the world where it makes sense economically, but looking at how our supply chains are being disrupted due to this pandemic, and what is the value of bringing in a more regional manufacturing strategy and really value the speed to market as opposed to cost basis.
Could you talk a little about this expectation and how to make sure that it is actually a win-win?
Yeah, that speaks to our royalty income from FY 2018, which almost half of that was one-time extraordinary income. Yes, there's the transactional piece, and I would say the top 5 inventions really accounts for a vast majority of that income distribution. So it's really about the home runs that you have.
Very nice. And you mentioned you have medical centers, 5 of them, national laboratories, 3 of them. How does, let's say, for example, your POC fund, how does that help once you decide to invest in one of the startups and you allow this POC fund? If they need to, do you facilitate access to these labs and these medical centers? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thought is, yes, introducing all sorts of connectivities that really enhances just the funding aspect. I'll give you an example with COVID. At the onset of this pandemic, our unit was asked to look at UC technologies that exist to help to address COVID. So focusing on contact tracing and testing, diagnostics, and so forth. So once we found that short list of targets, we made introductions to UC Health, our hospital systems, and various parts of different campuses so that we can share potential technologies that can help them. So we do try to make introductions because UC could be customers, users of these technologies as well.
Very nice. And do you have any interesting outcome from this that you could share?
Yeah, I know some of our hospitals are already looking at these technologies and see if they can take that to market. I think particularly in the contact tracing and the testing areas, we're seeing a lot of interesting technologies and companies that quickly pivoted to develop testing capabilities that can turn around tests really quickly. I think it's also working with the communities. Some of our campuses have been asked by local public health officials to help with local testing as well. So the technology, it really doesn't stop at our campus borders, but really can go beyond into the communities to help address those issues.
Can you give us a feel about the POC fund next year? How many startups do you plan to fund with this POC fund, if everything goes well?
Yeah, I'm looking to raise 5 to 10 million as my initial effort, and we're looking to fund about 150 companies. So that is the target, but our ecosystem is so vast and the need is so great. So really thinking about, do we want something that's specific to start with? Do we want a general fund? But also always thinking about the diversity aspect to that. Can we give more opportunities for underrepresented communities?
Very nice. Thank you, Victoria. It was a treat to have you, and thank you for sharing your initiatives, what you're doing.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Nicola, for this great series of discussions. I really enjoyed it.